There are a number of structures and groups of structures that I would not pin or mark on a diagram and ask you to identify. And the reason is because there are these groups of structures that are so diffuse and scattered throughout the brain. Unless you're taking an entire course on neuroanatomy, there's no way that you could learn them, because you learn these in less than a minute, relatively speaking. The basal nuclei fits into that group, because if you take a look what's included in the basal nuclei, the caudate nucleus, the putamen, the globus pallidus, and the substantia nigra, yeah, don't worry, you won't be asked to identify them physically. You do need to know what they are and what they do. So the basal nuclei are these islands of gray matter that are throughout the brain. And remember, gray matter, unmyelinated axons. And they will have various functions, which include them being a relay station for motor impulses. And remember, motor impulses are traveling out, not in, out. So they will carry information from the motor cortex in the precentral gyrus outward. They use dopamine to control muscular activity. And dopamine, in this case, inhibits excess movement. So if you have insufficient dopamine produced, you are going to have excess movement, twitches and spasms and jerks, what have you. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter that is implicated in Parkinson's. So a lot of the symptoms of Parkinson's disease patients experience because they do not produce this inhibiting neurotransmitter. In addition to what they do in terms of relaying motor information, basal nuclei will also play a role in all of these, which include learning motor patterns, executive function. I'll add the ION on that. Also, they play a role in reward and reinforcement systems, which can lead to addictive behaviors and or habit formation. We're also learning more about how the basal nuclei modify ongoing movements, because they are going to stimulate the motor nuclei that are scattered throughout the brainstem. And actually, the basal nuclei also will adjust muscle tone when you're starting a voluntary movement subconsciously. And this shows you where the basal nuclei reside. And that shows you a frontal section, and gives you information on where they reside that way. We also need to talk about the limbic system, because the limbic system will include the basal nuclei. Limbic system is going to be involved in emotional response and will include a lot of the structures that we'll talk about in the rest of the sections on the brain. So what does it do? I think the biggest thing that you need to remember is the second and third one down. So it's going to recognize life-threatening situations or upsets, either physically or psychologically. And it will also be associated with feeling and expressing emotions, especially the extreme ones: rage, fear, pain, pleasure, and sexual arousal. This is one of the systems that kicks in if you are in this situation. There you are, walking down the street, minding your own business, and you see this baby buggy. It's parked on the street. and the mom is talking to somebody or on her cell phone or what have you, and the baby buggy escapes from the mom and goes rolling into the street, and a Mack truck is bearing down on the baby buggy. This is the system that allows you, in conjunction with the sympathetic nervous system, to do one of those incredible feats where you suddenly become an expert at the 100-yard dash, and you run out there and you push the baby buggy and you stop the Mack truck with one hand. Do not try that at home. I use that as an example because this is one of and part of the systems that is going to kick in when you are in such an extreme state. In addition, it will help you control and establish your emotional experiences and how you express your emotions. It's going to help facilitate memory storage and retrieval. It will affect your motivation. It is going to link your conscious and intellectual functions of your cortex, sort of those executive decision-making processes, with your unconscious and autonomic, think automatic functions that are controlled by the brainstem. And this shows you the limbic system, various parts of the limbic system. We're going to talk about two parts of this, which include the amygdala. You can't see my cursor, neither can I, and the hippocampus, which are going to be associated with memory and learning. It shows you the interconnection between the basal ganglia and the limbic system, as well as the amygdala and the hippocampus, and parts of the diencephalon, which we cover in the next section, I believe. So let's talk about the amygdala. This is going to connect the sensory systems with the limbic system and the cerebrum. And it is going to link emotions and memories. It's also going to link emotions and memories to your sense of smell, because part of this, the area, the cortex, which allows you to process your sense of smell, it sits right next to it. It will also regulate your sympathetic responses, your fight or flight responses, and your heart rate. The hippocampus is all about learning and storing and retrieving long-term memories. So how do we learn? That crash course clip is an excellent bit on how we make memories and learn. And basically, learning is the acquisition of new knowledge. And memory is the consequence of learning. And there are two sort of overarching memories: short-term, which is literally electrochemical events and your so-called working memory, and long-term is repetitive stimulation of the same neurons. So when you talk about, it's like riding a bike, you remember how to ride a bike because of the fact you have these neurons, this neuronal circuitry that you've ingrained so you can remember how to ride a bike. There are actual synaptic changes that occur which will strengthen those connections.